All right, good morning.
Morning.
So my name is Jonny Roman. I'm a life coach and a spiritual psychologist. And today I want to talk to you about love. And I'm not talking about love like between two partners. I'm talking about divine love or spiritual love that is our essential nature. And everything I'm going to present to you today is based on the principles and practices of spiritual psychology as taught by the University of Santa Monica, which is where I received my master's degree, and it's widely recognized as the Worldwide Center for the Study and Practice of Spiritual Psychology. So I use what I've learned studying this with my coaching clients and with myself on a daily basis. And today I want to present to you some of the basic foundations of the teachings, how it transformed my life, and how it can transform yours as well. So I grew up right here in North Stamford, not too far from where we are right now. And while I had a really great upbringing, loving parents, stable childhood, overall feeling really well supported, I experienced trauma in my teenage years that left me feeling severely depressed for the majority of my life, all the way into my early 30s. I was so lost, searching for answers that I couldn't find. And I was distracting myself with addictions, with travel, with personal development work. And I was so depressed and mentally unstable throughout this time that I often thought of suicide, and believing that taking my own life was the only way to really stop the mental and emotional pain that I was experiencing. And I really tried my best to find answers. I became a personal development and therapy junkie. I was obsessed with Tony Robbins, the motivational guru guy. I went to as many seminars and workshops as I could. I read and listened to as many books as I could and audio programs and things like that, constantly searching for answers. And I found a lot of answers. I mean, I really did. There's a million answers out there. Everyone has an answer. The thing was that the answers I found worked for a little bit, but nothing really lasted. And no matter how many breakthroughs I had or awarenesses I came to or tools or tricks that I discovered, I kept being pulled back down into my own self-made despair. And it wasn't really until I discovered the principles and practices of spiritual psychology, some of which I'm going to share with you today, and that I began to really connect with the understanding of my own essential loving and spiritual nature. That's when I truly began to heal and come into a place of compassion and acceptance and love for the world around me, and most importantly, for myself. So today, I invite you to listen with an open mind and an open heart. I'm going to share some things with you, and I just invite you to listen from a place of openness. If what I share makes sense, great. And if it doesn't land well with you or leaves you with more questions, that's fine as well. I'm of the belief that you take what works and what makes sense for you, and you leave the rest. And there are so many right ways of traveling this path, right ways, that it really doesn't matter which path you're on so long as you're just on the path. And what really ultimately matters is what works for you. So, like any good skyscraper or strong, structurally sound building, spiritual psychology has as its core 23 foundational principles upon which it is built. And I'm going to share with you just a few of them today. I don't have time to go over all of them in the short time I have with you, but just give you a basic understanding of how it all works. And if this is of interest to you, there's a really phenomenal book by my teachers, Ron and Mary Hulnick, called Loyalty to Your Soul. If this is of interest to you, I encourage you to just, get the book and do your own research. So the first and most foundational principle of spiritual psychology is that we are not human beings with a soul. We are souls having a human experience. And this is the most basic principle because it creates context for everything that comes next. If we are souls having a human experience and not the other way around, then this human experience in which we as souls find ourselves must serve some kind of purpose, right? Why would a soul choose to have a human experience, especially when the human experience can be so difficult and challenging at times? I mean, life can be hard, right? It's not all peaches and cream. I've had my own version of that. for 15 years, I thought about checking out of my human experience. Hanging up my coat saying, I've had enough of this. I don't want this human experience anymore. And, by all accounts, at least how it must have been perceived from the outside, I had all the makings of a really great and relatively easy life. But that was not my experience of it. So then, what is the nature and purpose of this human experience that we find ourselves in? Well, so as spiritual psychology sees it, Earth functions sort of like a school where we come to learn to awaken to our spirituality. It's like getting a PhD in spiritual awakening, where each experience we have in this world is part of our spiritual curriculum. And we're learning to wake up to our essential nature. So what does that mean? What is our essential nature? To understand that, we first need to understand the nature of God. Because if we are divine souls having a human experience, then we can come to understand our divine essential nature as being a part of God, which leads to the second principle. The nature of God is love.
Yes.
We believe that in the truest sense of the word, God's essential nature is love. And whatever God means to you, whatever vision you have, God, spirit, universe, etc., in your mind, its essential nature is love. And so have you ever had that experience of divine love? Have you ever had a time where you felt awe of the graceful power of divine love in your life? Maybe you experienced it with a child. Maybe you were walking through nature and felt it. Maybe you experienced it right here in this church. Wherever you were or whatever you felt, there was a part of you that had this sense of it being otherworldly, divine, deep, and spiritual. That experience is our primary goal when we practice spiritual psychology. And that leads to our third principle. Direct experience is the process through which belief or faith is transformed into knowing. We are a mind-driven world. Our primary evolutionary advantage as humans is our mind. We've used this mind over hundreds of thousands of years to get us to where we are today. So we have every right to want to use our minds to figure out this whole God thing. And I was talking to someone the other evening about spirituality, and he kept quoting me all these different philosophers that he was studying, saying things like the Aristotelian understanding of our inherent nature. And I discovered myself through understanding Nietzsche, and Derrida said this, and Derrida said that, and it was really amazing and quite admirable how much he had studied this to really try and understand spirituality and its nature. But from the spiritual standpoint, it is not through knowledge that we have knowing. It is through experience. We cannot access our spiritual nature solely through our minds. The mind is ill-equipped to understand the scope of the spiritual. I mean, how do you describe love? How many songs have you heard, or movies you've seen, or poems you read that you felt really captured the essence of love, and yet at the same time they never came close to the actual experience of what it felt like to feel that love? That experience is what we're referring to with regards to direct knowing. So now, if we understand ourselves as souls having a human experience, and that the divine essence of this soul that is having the human experience is part of God, and we understand that God is love, then our fourth principle directly follows. Since we are all part of God, our nature is also love. And we have the opportunity to know our loving nature experientially here and now. And this is what spiritual awakening is all about, taking the opportunity we have to more fully experience ourselves and our essential nature as the presence of love. And we use this earth school and the lessons that we're given each and every day as the opportunity to do so. So this all sounds lovely, I'm sure. You know, it's like, oh, I'm a soul having a human experience. This is awesome. I'm part of God, and God is love. So therefore, I am love. Like, this sounds great to my mind. My mind soaks it all up. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to my mind. I'm so excited to bring what I'm learning here out into the world and give it a try, and we leave here and our mind forgets. It forgets because the person on High Ridge Road is driving really erratic and being a jerk. Or the Dunkin' Donuts guy messed up our order, or our significant other didn't pick up his socks from the kitchen floor after you told him 1,000,000 times to do so. Not talking about my wife there. Or perhaps something worse happens. My house gets robbed. My child ends up in the hospital. I get into a car accident. The person I didn't want to won the presidency. And our minds forget. So this is when, as we like to say, school is in session. This is when we are in class studying our spiritual curriculum and the specific lessons that our soul came here to Earth School to learn, which is where the 7th principle comes into play. And I'll get to the 5th and 6th in a second. All of life is for learning. All of life is for learning. As spiritual psychologists, we adopt what we refer to as a learning orientation to life. We can learn from everything in life. Every experience we have is an opportunity to learn something, to know ourselves more fully, and to know our divine nature, to know ourselves as love and as a part of God. Which is where our 5th principle comes into play. Physical world reality exists for the purpose of spiritual evolution. Physical world reality, which is the life that we're living in, the human experience of living in this world. Our souls are using this human experience in this world, and every single experience we have, no matter how small, is for the sole purpose of our own spiritual evolution and awakening. Awakening into the knowing of ourselves as the presence of love. And sometimes this can be a hard thing to accept. Like, you mean to tell me that the trauma that I experienced that led me to want to end my life for nearly 15 years was part of my spiritual curriculum to help me know myself on a deeper spiritual level of loving and thus come closer to God? Like, yes, that is exactly what I mean. Because now I know what real deep pain is like. I know my own experience of deep emotional pain. So I can now use that to support and love others who may be experiencing something similar. I can have compassion for them, what they're going through, and I can be more of a support to them. But even more importantly, I can use those experiences to bring compassion to myself. I mess up all the time. I don't live a perfect life just because I've studied all of this stuff. I still eat too much. I still get uncomfortable in social situations sometimes. I still have desires and wants and dreams that I haven't fulfilled yet that cause me upset. I still get upset. But I can bring compassion to myself now instead of berating or judging myself like I used to do all the time. And that means there's more of me available to be of support to others and more of me available to be open to God. My emotional pain used to keep me closed, hiding, wanting to escape and run away. But now I know those experiences made me who I am today. And they give me the strength and guidance that I can use to work with my clients who are going through challenges of their own. And whatever upsets, setbacks, negative emotions, and things that don't go my way that I experience, I'm able to bring a learning orientation to them and see them as spiritual curriculum, as opportunities for me to grow. And sometimes getting to that point of understanding and awareness and appreciation for the lesson doesn't come immediately. It's not like I get upset or insecure in the moment and then it's gone. Sometimes it takes minutes, hours, sometimes days, in order for me to release my grip on my anger or my insecurity or sadness or righteousness or whatever I'm experiencing, in order for me to come back to an understanding of it as an opportunity for my own learning. But thankfully now I almost always come back to that space, that understanding, which gives me context to put those experiences in my life. So a quick example of that, my wife and I just recently moved to Minnesota. And that's where she's from, and I'm real happy that we moved there. It's been a good experience, but I had a lot of resistance in the decision-making process of that, and I did not want to move. We were in Colorado at the time. I really actually liked Colorado, and where we were living, and we had a deadline to make the decision in order to move. And the day before that deadline, my wife had a session with her life coach. So long story short, her coach basically told her to just make the decision and tell me that we were moving. So, you know, I'm a life coach as well, and that was, to be clear, that was not a good move on his part. She was stressed, she was emotional, she was easily suggestible. And he should have known better, but he had her best interest in mind, not mine. And so he made a decision to subvert my role in the relationship, and she acted on it. And so, you know, to her credit, I knew immediately that it wasn't her speaking. I knew it was her life coach, but I still got really upset. I was really angry. I was hurt. I felt like they decided something about my life, and it was none of his business to do that. And I was so angry that for 2 days I didn't talk to her. And even 5 days later, like, the upset was still there. I could still feel the upset energy inside of me. But I spent some time using my tools and skills from spiritual psychology and shortly realized the opportunity that this experience was presenting to me. And I understood how I could use it for my own growth. Now, I'm so grateful for that experience. I even wrote a thank you letter to her coach. I let him know that even though I didn't agree with how he handled the situation, I found the learning opportunity so valuable that I was grateful for it. And I've used that learning experience with my clients, and I'm using it right here now, helping to give context to the speech so that you have a real-world example. That's a learning orientation to life. He apologized. We still ended up moving to Minnesota. But that was due to further conversations and decisions that she and I made together, so there's no place for resentment inside. And I share this with you to emphasize the sixth core principle, which is that spiritual evolution or growth is a process. It's not an event. We don't need to get it all right now. You don't need to walk out of here spiritually enlightened beings. This stuff takes time. It's a process. It took me 20 years to see that the trauma I experienced was a blessing for me. It took me 6 or 7 days to experience the Minnesota experience as a blessing. However long it takes, as long as we're adopting a learning orientation to life, the opportunity remains within our power to seize it and use it for our growth, upliftment, and healing. And that can take time. So this is where we start moving from theory and mind into practice and experience. So over the course of the 2 years master's program that I did, we learned 44 basic skills and facilitation strategies that we use to create experiential opportunities for ourselves and our clients. And the two most foundational skills that we learned are called seeing the loving essence and heart-centered listening. And the goal of seeing the loving essence, if you can sort of see past some of the flowery, lovey language of it, is actually quite profound. If I can recognize that I am indeed a part of God, and therefore my inherent nature is love, and I understand that everyone else is the same way, then I can begin to shift my frame of reference inside my mind and begin to see everyone as divine beings having a human experience, whose essential nature is also love. Despite their behavior, despite whatever they're doing, I can understand that they too are trying to awaken more fully into the loving essence that they are. Therefore, my relationship with that person and my ability to have compassion for them increases exponentially. It doesn't mean I don't get triggered or upset, but I can bring myself back to that awareness and understanding. So an example of how this played out in my experience, a couple years ago I spent a weekend at a maximum security women's prison as part of a program that brings elements of spiritual psychology into the prison systems to help the prisoners. And during the 2 days, we all learned these skills, and we broke off into what we call trios, where 3 people sit together, and one acts as the receiver or the client who's sharing about a problem they're dealing with. One acts as the facilitator or coach who's practicing the skill that we're learning, and another is the neutral observer who sort of sits silently and listens to the exchange. And I sat across from and facilitated women who had committed murder and other very high-level crimes. And my job was not to judge their behavior, to judge the crime they committed. My job was to sit with them and see their loving essence. And I saw them as loving beings who had, for one reason or another, done something wrong to land them in prison. Whatever they did, it didn't change the fact that at their core, they were still a loving being, still born from God and still worthy of love. They most likely needed to be where they were. They needed to receive some form of punishment for the crime that they committed. That's not up for argument, but it did not change the loving essence that was their inherent nature. Perhaps others couldn't see it, and perhaps they couldn't even see it themselves, but I could see it. And from that place, I can be of much more support to them. And that's the same approach I use with my clients when I'm coaching them. It's not my job to judge their behavior. It's my job to see their loving essence and know that if they did something bad, it doesn't change anything about who they are at their core. It's a perspective that really helps put my relationship with a coaching client into context, because I can understand that if they're a loving being at their core, but their behavior didn't match that, then I can start to explore why they did what they did and bring them back to the place of loving inside themselves. That's what I mean by seeing the loving essence. And the second skill is heart-centered listening. This is about listening from the heart, not from the mind. It's a different way of listening to another person, and one of the biggest gifts we can really give someone. Many people, when they engage in conversation, focus on what they're going to say next, and don't focus on what is being said. If you watch CNN or Fox News panels for 2 minutes, it's the best example I've ever seen of people not listening to each other. So we're often more focused on being right than on connecting with the person in front of us. I was talking to a friend the other night who said to me, if I know I'm not going to win an argument, I'm not going to participate. So heart-centered listening requires us to take a step back and really listen to the person, not just their words. Early on in my relationship with my wife, before I was more sort of aware of a lot of this stuff, she would share things that were going on in her world, problems she was having, challenges, fears, issues at work, etc. And I would try to comfort her and, give her suggestions on how to fix the problem she was experiencing or find ways to make it better. And she would say to me, "Johnny, you're not listening to me. I really need you to listen. Like, why won't you listen?" And I had no idea what she was talking about. I was like, "What do you mean? I am listening. I heard everything you just said. I'm trying to help you out here." She's like, "No, I just need you to listen. I don't need you to fix. I don't need you to make anything better or correct it. I just want to feel heard." And it wasn't until I really learned this skill and understood what she was talking about, in addition to another skill we use called perception checking, that it made sense to me. She wants me to listen to all of her. Not just her words, but her feelings, her fears, what's going on inside. She just wants to know I heard her, not her words. So that's what heart-centered listening is really all about. So everything I've shared here is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more. I studied this for 3 years, and it just keeps getting deeper and better. There's so many more principles and practices that I wish I had the time to share, but unfortunately I don't. But just remember, as you go forward today, remember some of the core principles we talked about. You are a soul having a human experience, so be gentle with yourselves. Remember to use everything for your learning, upliftment, and growth. Even the things that feel hard and challenging, how can you use them as opportunities for healing and growth? And as you go out into the world and interact with your friends, your family, your community, listen to them from your heart and look for their loving essence, even if you don't agree with them, because it's always there. It's always there inside of them, and it's always there inside of you. And as you do that, may it all bring you closer to God as well. So thank you very much for listening, and I do have to leave soon to go to a wedding, but I can stay for a little bit if anyone has any further questions or anything. I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.